Today is the 7th of January 2023 and you're watching Deprogram video number 43. So this is a topic I've wanted to talk about for a long time. I'm doing this video to debunk the lies that we've been told about fossil fuels, which have nothing to do with fossils, not plant fossils, not animal fossils. There's no possible way that all the oil that comes out of the ground, the vast quantities of oil that come out of the ground, could not possibly be from decomposing fossils. Just based on the quantity makes it impossible. I'll talk more about that later. But in this video, I'm going to play you an 8-minute clip from I think he's a Lieutenant Fletcher Prouty. He, you can watch that for yourself and see what you think. I'm also going to read an article from, I think it's Science Direct or some science article I've got here to read to you, and then I'll give you my speculation about exactly why I think it is that they want to take us off of the use of fossil fuels. By the time you get to the end of this video, you'll never be able to listen to anyone use the term fossil fuels without being aware that you're listening to somebody who is clueless, who has just believed what they've been told and never actually tried to calculate in their mind how much oil we use, that all the industries across the planet are just burning oil all the time, and how many fossils could there have been for... The point is, oil replenishes itself. That's the key takeaway that you have to understand about petroleum. It is not a limited resource. It's actually unlimited because it's constantly being manufactured by the earth. A good way to think of it is, you can give blood every few months if you want to, and it really has no effect. If anything, it might have a positive effect on your body by releasing pressure. There are a lot of people that produce too much blood and they literally have to do bloodletting, like they'll drain half a litre of blood every couple of weeks. That's what oil is. It's like the blood of the earth. And this is what sort of motivated me to get this video finally done, is because I think I can explain why they want to get us off fossil fuels, and it's nothing to do with pollution at all. Before I talk more about that, I want to play you this video. Before I play you the video, I've just got to add this bit in about greenhouse gases. They tell us that we're producing too much greenhouse gases. Has anybody stopped to think about what is a greenhouse gas? Literally, in commercial greenhouses, like where they produce our tomatoes and cucumbers, and large-scale greenhouses that produce tons of food, they use burners, or they get CO2 from different methods, but they increase the carbon dioxide in these massive greenhouses, which multiplies the yield by at least double. If they double the carbon dioxide and they double the strength of the mineral food that they give them, that gives double the yield. So greenhouse gases are carbon dioxide, which is pumped into greenhouses to produce double the food. There's a lot of people talking about how since the Industrial Revolution, if you look down at the earth from above, it's a lot more green now. Like satellite images show that the earth has greened a lot more now than what it was a century ago. And this is greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases are the gases of life. That's the term that David Icke has sort of coined, that greenhouse gases are carbon dioxide is the gas of life. As we can see, because they pump the gas of life into greenhouses and produce more food. So it's almost like, the point that I'm making is that it's like mockery. It's like they're actually telling us the truth, that greenhouse gases are essential for life. And if we're then dumb enough to go along with it, if we're willing to cooperate with the demonization of greenhouse gases, even though they tell us they're greenhouse gases, then do we really deserve much better than what we're getting? I really do believe these evil oligarchs that have this eugenics ideology, they are deeply evil, but they're not stupid. They do this sort of mockery. I mean, I just imagine them laughing at us for the things that they put over the news and that people go along with. They must just be in stitches, you know, because they're the ones that promote the bullshit. So the fact that most of us believe it, it must be just hilarious for them. I can imagine them literally just being in stitches, rolling around, laughing at just the stupidity they get us to believe. But now I want to play you this video from Lieutenant Prouty about the origins of petroleum. So this video is titled, Why the Petroleum Industry Adopted the Use of the Term Fossil Fuels. So listen to, I think he's a lieutenant, his name starts with L, so I think he's a Lieutenant Fletcher Prouty, and then I'll see you at the other side.
Well, you mentioned in one of your last talks that petroleum wasn't what we thought it was, that it wasn't a fossil fuel, that it didn't come from fossil animal.
Yeah.
Is it just a mineral? Is it a mineral like any other mineral? Is that how it what would you say? What's the origin of
You see,
petroleum?
when they first found petroleum, because they were beginning to make motors and needed on axles of wheels on railroad trains and all that sort of thing, and remember, trains started in the beginning of the 19th century. Then oil went from just a lubricant to a fuel, and it made it valuable. And Rockefeller happened to be the smartest man in the business at the time, but he made most of his money, or much of it, off the transport of the petroleum as well as selling it. But one thing they realized was, because oil is putting a price on oil is like putting a price on a pail of water. You know, no initial cost. It's in the ground, and in those days they were, some of it almost what you'd call surface mining the oil. They didn't go down deep. So in order to get the price up, they hit on the idea that they would have to make it appear to be scarce. That after we take the next few barrels out, we're probably going to have to close as well. You know, that kind of thing. Well, a very fortuitous event. In 1892, there was a convention in Geneva of scientists to determine what organic substances are. Well, the definition of organic is a substance with hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon. And so it's usually a living substance, a tree. You analyze a dead tree, hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen, and grass, and so on, living things. Animals, we are hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon. So at this Geneva Convention, Rockefeller took advantage of sending some scientists over who said, oil, petroleum, is hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon. Therefore, it must be derived from the spoiling, the rotting of formerly living matter. And playing the game properly, when this scientific convention was over, they defined oil as the residue from formerly living matter. Well, that makes it a fossil fuel. I don't know why they decided to use the word fossil, but it says formerly living matter is fossil. Well, of course, today, and another thing we should know is that there has never been a fossil, a real fossil found below 16,000 feet. And you can't argue at 16,000 there's a level line, because someplace the ground sinks and so on. But 16 is what the scientists say, 16,000. We mine oil, or we drill for oil, at 30,000, 33,000, 28,000 every day of the week. So right there we rule it out that it isn't fossil fuel. It's called fossil fuel for the minds of the public to feel that it is an asset that is running out, being depleted. We talk about depletion allowance, which is a lot of, and actually, if you know the world's oil supply, you know that it is not going to run out for an awfully long time. It is the second most prevalent liquid on Earth. And we haven't begun to dig. Well, with all that background, you see, the people in charge of the petroleum business, for perfectly reasonable business things, like any other man in a business, wants to keep his price as high as he can get away with. And the way to do is just say, well, there's no more. The last barrel is going to cost $1,000, and then it's all done. And they preach that stuff. What bothers me is that in geology books, it's in there. The geologists say it's a fossil fuel. They've been bought. I mean, I went to a 4-year federal staff energy seminar run by the government of the United States during the so-called energy crisis. I was the participant that represented the railroad industry. The airline industry was there. Every AA, administrative assistant of senators and congressmen, was there. The CIA was there. The Defense Department was there. The State Department was there. Sometimes sitting right in front of me in the row would be Henry Kissinger with his friend, the head of Department of Defense. It's too bad I can't put the names with them. But anyway, people like that, top men in the government, sitting there listening to the federal staff energy seminar. Well, what this was doing is, for 4 years, they were teaching a propaganda line to the leading people in this country, and therefore to the leading people in the world, when you include the Kissinger and Schlesinger, among others. And the object of it was, as Kissinger used in his own terms when it was time for him to speak, to create a world price for oil. In other words, not 30 cents a gallon here and 90 cents a gallon there, but let's get a world price. That's their goal, and they're trying to do that for wheat and everything else. We don't realize what the controls are, whether it's oil or some of these other things. Almost everything today is being categorized at the highest price they can possibly make it go. And so calling petroleum a fossil fuel is the basis for this system with respect to petroleum.
Nice.
And I don't know if the name Arthur Kantrowitz rings any bell. Arthur Kantrowitz is the head of the Kantrowitz Labs, set up by the Avco company near Boston, scientific laboratories, and a great man in the scientific world. And Kantrowitz and I were sitting at a table at this seminar once, and the table happened to be all young college grad, PhD geologists. And so just to get a conversation started, I turned to Kantrowitz and I said, Arthur, what do you think about this foolishness of these speakers talking about fossil fuel? And it was kind of put up. He started laughing. He said, that gets me. He says, I don't have a geology degree, but he had 1,000 other degrees. And he said, I don't understand. See, you'd think that these heads, these other fellows at the table, we did it on purpose, start listening, And he said, are you gentlemen, he says, you're here at the meeting, are you gentlemen by any chance geologists? And one fellow, yes, I am. And the other, yeah. He said, well, why don't you tell me? He said, why is oil? And he went on like that. We brought the house down because nobody could argue with Kantrowitz. He like Einstein. People aren't going to, and he told them right there, he said, just drop it. But it's in all the books and in all the papers. But it started from that strange meeting in 1892, a scientific convention. I have a big, thick scientific encyclopedia put out by the Van Ostrand Company that's about 15 years old now. But it has the whole story of the conference. It doesn't have the Rockefeller part, but it has the whole story of how they straightened out organic chemicals and how it's all figured. And they've got petroleum right in there.
Amazing. Amazing. So
These aren't accidental things, you see. There's a dollar sign behind almost everything.
okay.
So there you go. As you just heard about the distance, no fossil has ever been found below 16,000 feet, whereas oil is frequently found at 24,000, 30,000 feet. So just that by itself means it should not be called a fossil fuel because it's not from fossils. And in addition to that, I'm going to ask you to use your imagination for a minute. If you've watched my earlier videos, you know I'm quite big on the use of our imaginations. It's a gift that we have and we should use it. So, if you think about the fact that there has been some effort gone into calculating, you know, because this depopulation drive is all about there's too many of us, which is just so false. I've said before how the calculations that have been done point to an idea where you could say if the state of Texas was a giant city, this is just hypothetical. It's not as though this is a real idea. This is just a thought process for the purpose of calculating volume and quantity. And so if the state of Texas could be made into one big city, it would literally be able to house all 8 billion people on the planet. The whole population of the world could live in a city if there was a city as big as Texas. Now, that's not just a pile of dead people, that's a living city. Every person on the planet could live in a city if it was the size of the state of Texas, which is a big state, but it's one state on the whole planet of Earth. So if you take all those people that could be living in that giant city, the size of Texas, and they would have all die, 8 billion dead bodies, that wouldn't be as big as the whole state, because the state of Texas is big enough to house living people, 8 billion living people. So if they were all dead people, just bodies, the volume of those bodies would be far smaller than the state of Texas. It would be some fraction of it. Imagine whatever fraction all the 8 billion bodies would be, but it wouldn't be a pile as big as the state. If we could live comfortably in a city that big, then our bodies in a pile would be a far smaller section, maybe like the size of one city, in a pile of dead bodies. I know it's a weird thing to imagine, but just follow me. Now, think about, what is it now, 100 years of heavy petroleum industry. I mean, I don't even know how to use words to define like how much oil has been used over all that time. All I can ask you to do is imagine 100 years of fueling every car, every plane, every machine, every industry has been fueled on petroleum year upon year upon year. For, I think it's over a century now we've been using petroleum as a fuel source. So if fossil fuels were from like dead dinosaurs, how many dinosaurs must there have been? If 8 billion people would make a pile of bodies a fraction of the size of the state of Texas, and that pile of bodies was in the earth decomposing, creating oil, that oil deposit would be drained empty like within the first week. You know, do you see what I mean? We use a lot of oil. To think that there could be so many fossils, I mean, How many dead dinosaurs do people think that there must have been? Can you see the quantification aspect of this I'm trying to get at? It's literally impossible for oil to have anything to do with fossils. And now I'm going to prove that to you even further by reading you this article. I'll put it up on the screen. Alright, so this article is by Science Daily from February 3rd, 2008. It's called Finding New Oil in Long Exhausted Oil Wells. The summary of it, I'll link this article below, but there's plenty of articles like this. There's a lot of information online if you know how to search for it. Just look for replenishing exhausted oil wells, and there's plenty of evidence of this. But this one, the summary is, oil reappears from time to time in old deposits and long ago exhausted oil wells. Oil rushes in or sometimes floods back. In the researchers' opinions, to overhaul old oil deposits is much more profitable and efficient than expensive geological exploration works at new locations. So you see, that makes perfect sense. Trying to discover new locations is pretty pointless when you can just go back around to the old oil wells and you find that they've filled back up. And that's what happens. When an oil well is exhausted, it's only exhausted because it hasn't had time to replenish yet. But they go around and reuse the old wells. There's no need to continually be searching for new mines. It's not like gold or diamonds. That's the industry. That's how it works. And everyone in the industry knows that. I mean, you've got to think, everyone from the low end of the mining operation to the top, they must be saying to themselves, you know, damn, there must be a lot of dead dinosaurs down there. It's just ridiculous. Doesn't matter how intelligent you are, you can be half brain dead. You see that amount of flowing material that continually keeps pouring out of the ground, you just know that can't be from fossils. They just insult our intelligence to such a ridiculous extent, which is why I really wanted to do this video, because I frequently hear actually quite educated people talking about fossil fuels, and I think, have you ever thought about that word that you're using, fossil fuels? Like, don't you realize how ridiculous that sounds? None of them do. None of them. Even the most intelligent people, some that I highly respect, will talk about fossil fuels without even thinking twice. So maybe I'll send this video to them next time I hear them doing that. And so now I want to get to why I believe they want us to stop using oil. It's nothing to do with pollution. It's definitely nothing to do with CO2. We need CO2. If it's got anything to do with CO2, it's the eugenics thing. It's because they're trying to kill us off. That's the only reason they want to reduce CO2. But even as far as pollution goes, this is another quantification issue, the pollution thing. You know, I heard someone say once, well, I just don't imagine how we can have so many people all using cars and not create a CO2 issue. It's, again, CO2 and pollution are two completely different things, but let's say she meant pollution. The Earth is a very big place. It's a very big globe. It's not flat. I'm finding it really intolerable to listen to these people. I think they're just CIA operatives just trying to pollute the comments section with garbage. This is, you know, these flat earthers are really painful for me, and I hope they'll at least not do it in my comments. The sheer size of the Earth, as big as it is, the volume of air around the Earth. So if the Earth is as big as it is, think about how much air is around outside of it. Human industry, even at its worst, like heavy industry like China, the manufacturing heart of the world, they have some pollution issues because of the speed at which they're pumping out pollution. The atmosphere doesn't have time to carry it away, but the space, that's the word I'm looking for. It's not just the air around the planet, it's space beyond that. Like, there's so much space out there. And so the pollution that we create, given time, it floats off into space. They talk about this ozone layer like we've got this lid on us. It's so ridiculous. I mean, some of the things that we grew up believing, when you stop and think about it, it's infuriating how badly we've been lied to. They treat us like we're absolute children. Space is massive, and pollution doesn't need to be a problem. It's just the carelessness of, like, the dirt and grime that gets pumped into the air, that doesn't need to happen. There's all kinds of filters that can be, exhaust from industry can pass through carbon and other materials that can capture that grime and what have you, the filth that's in smoke, and it doesn't need to go. If you're worried about the atmosphere, we don't need to pump it into the atmosphere. It can be filtered. Actually, fluoride is the filth that is taken from filters in the aluminium industry, and they put it in our drinking water. I think that's got a lot to do with why it's very hard to get people to understand things, because they're full of neurotoxins. That's another topic. So the point I'm making is, they're not trying to get us to stop using fossil fuels because they give a damn about pollution. I mean, the people that are ranting and raving about needing to stop using fossil fuels are actually the worst polluters on the planet. And the hypocrisy, it's just the typical garbage that we see from these criminals. But with this amount of space there is in space, you can be sure it's nothing to do with pollution. And I'm going to tell you what I think it is. I'm going to put up an image. See this area called the Ring of Fire? This is a geological phenomenon. It's this ring around this part of the Pacific Ocean is where there is a lot of seismic activity, volcanoes and earthquakes. About 80% of seismic activity happens along this ring. And this is the part I'm going to speculate on. I believe we have had much less seismic activity than what we otherwise would have had if we were not continually draining oil from the ground. Because oil is forever being made under the earth, constantly. And if we weren't draining it to use it, it would have to get out somehow. And that's what volcanoes are for, to release the pressure. Even earthquakes, I believe, have some relationship to oil, again, with the pressure build up from the constant creation of new oil under the ground. On a side note, water is also created under the ground. New water is created deep in the earth. If you want to know more about that, you can go onto the website called Primary Water. Deborah Tavares has a website that she's been trying to educate people for probably like 10 or 15 years about the fact that water is created under the earth, much like oil. Of course, not in the same spot, but these two substances are created by the earth, deep within the earth. If we weren't tapping oil and draining it out and using it, it would have to get out somehow. And I believe that part of the reason they want to stop us from using oil is because these people want us all dead. And the Ring of Fire has been really quite tame for a long time. In fact, we were supposed to have a massive, like, apocalyptic sort of event with the ring of fire was supposed to just completely erupt. I think sometime already that was supposed to have happened. And I'm thinking that this push to get us off petroleum might be because the vampires have realized that this apocalyptic, burning of everything on the planet from the ring of fire out is not going to happen, because we're draining the oil out as it's being created. And therefore, they want to stop draining the oil so they can burn us all to death. Well, we already know that they've launched a biological weapon across every nation of the planet, and the vast majority of people have been injected with it. So you cannot question that the rulers want us all dead. It's evident now. That's not speculation. That's a fact. That's a proven fact. And I'm just speculating that keeping the pressure in the earth from not using oil is another tool for them to use to get rid of us, basically. That's what I'm saying. Of course, the main reason is that without oil, we can't do farming, we can't support any industry, and most people can't survive. If we can't use machinery to farm and produce food, then we starve. And that's the main reason, it seems to me, why they want to stop us from using oil, is just to starve us to death. I mean, now that we've seen what they're trying to do, what they are doing with this biological weapon that they've lied and called, all the other things that they do make perfect sense. It's all a part of their eugenics ideology. And destroying industry by creating this issue against petroleum clearly links to setting up the famine that they're trying to set up, which is also evident by the burning down of all the food manufacturing sites. I mean, there has never been such an anomaly of fires and explosions going off wherever food is being processed and manufactured is just burning down. George Soros, Bill Gates, these people want us dead. As long as we let them live, they will continue to work to make sure we're all dead. And I just want to highlight that fact because it is a fact. It's a fact because it's evident. You can see it in everything that they do, everything that they fund, everything that they say. They are murderous psychopaths, and there's no room for such beings. I can't believe they're allowed to live free. And I can't believe we have to fund governments that protect them with taxes. This is so wrong that I can't even express how wrong it is for us to be funding governments that protect genocidal murderers that are so much worse than Hitler and Mao. I mean, those guys that we look to as a part of history as being, such evil monsters, that we got way worse right here today, living it up in luxury. They enjoy living off of our backs and feeding off us, and our governments protect them. And we fund our governments to do that. If that doesn't make you sick, I mean, you've got to be dead. You can't be a living spirit and not be sickened by that. But most people are just completely ignorant to it. They have no idea about so much, which is why I'm trying to push these ideas that could help get people away from the television. Nobody's responded to that as yet, but as things get worse, I think my ideas are going to be heard by the people that need to hear them, and we'll get there in the end. What was the last point that I wanted to make about this? That's all I wanted to say. The real reason for this demonization of the petroleum industry is to send us back into the dark ages so we can't afford to produce food. But I do believe a secondary bonus, because there's always, multiple facets on all of their agendas. And I think that building up the pressure in the earth to set off that apocalyptic seismic event that's supposed to have happened already by now may well have something to do with this demonization of petroleum. And the last thing that I'll say to you is, with my video editing, if you ever see a really weird edit that doesn't flow well, just know that I've probably done that because I've repeated something and I don't want to repeat myself. So if you see those bad edits, know that that's just the best I could do, rather than playing myself, repeating myself. I can't stand it when people repeat themselves to me, and I've noticed myself doing it in my videos, so I really need to check that. And so if you do see bad edits, that's probably why they're there. And try to overlook that and notice that I do try to bring some content that you're not hearing everywhere else. I haven't heard anyone really do a good debunking of the fossil fuels lie, so hopefully this video will serve that purpose. And I've got a lot of other things I want to be talking about, but I just wanted to squeeze this one in today for the weekend. And yeah, I look forward to being with you again soon. So thank you all for your time and attention, and I'll see you soon. God bless everyone.
And so first let me say that all of us here, I think, are real environmentalists. We want to live in a clean environment. We want not to make it worse. We'd like to make it better. And so this is what we don't want. This is Shanghai. My son taught in the American school in Shanghai, China for 8 years, so I saw a lot of Shanghai, visiting my grandchildren there. And it often looks like this. And this, by the way, is not CO2. If you can see it, it's not CO2. You know, this is a combination of coal smoke and burning last year's wheat fields, you know, to get rid of the pests before you plant next year's crop. But it's not a good thing to be living in. And so I'm against that, and I know you're all against that as well. But CO2 is not a pollutant, so let me just compare what we breathe out. You know, each of us breathes out about 2 pounds of CO2 a day. That's almost a kilogram a day from each of us. You know, there are 8 billion people in the world, so that's 8 billion times a kilogram a day. That's a lot of CO2 just from people living. And one of the things that worries me when I hear fanatics talking, they say, well, the root cause of our problem is not CO2, it's too many people. You know, we shouldn't have more than 1 billion and probably less. And so I look around, there are 8 of us in the room, and which 7 of us is supposed to leave the earth, you know, to please the Greens. So I never got a good answer to that question. And anyway, look, when you burn a carbon-based fuel, you make a lot of CO2, a fair amount of water, more if you're burning natural gas than if you're burning coal. There's a little oxygen left in the smokestack, and essentially all of the nitrogen. There's a little bit of nitric oxide made, and that's a pollutant that you have to get rid of. And so plants should be designed to make sure that these are the only things that come out of the stack. But that's not that different from our own breath. You know, we breathe out almost the same amount of water as a coal plant. We breathe out somewhat less CO2 and a lot more oxygen. But there's fundamentally not a lot of difference. We're both systems that are based on burning fossil fuels. In our case, it's carbohydrates and fats. In the case of power plants, it's fossil fuels.